Welcome to Pomegranate Radio with your host, Jonathan Cook.
Good evening, Pomegranate Nation. Jonathan here in the Pomegranate Radio booth. Let me apologize right off the bat. This review will consist entirely of gameplay. It is illustrative when talking about a video game, but truth be told, my eyes are really sensitive to bright lights at the moment, and I really didn't want to be crying for the entire video. Now then, No Man's Sky, also known as the best example of a game being overhyped by someone other than the developers. Back in 2013, Sean Murray and Hello Games explained just how massive this game would be, and then sat back for 3 years while everyone else made it sound like the game would be a cross between The Second Coming of Kurt Cobain and a lap dance from Kate Moss. Does No Man's Sky deliver on being quite possibly the biggest game ever? Yes it does. 18 quintillion planets big. Does it deliver on anything else? No, it does not. God, no. Hell no. Bleep no. This game is easily the biggest letdown since The Phantom Menace. In retrospect, we really shouldn't be surprised. After all, the day one patch turns the atrocity on disc into something at least playable, so much so that Sean Murray urged players who got their grubby little mitts on leaked copies not to do any reviews, since the game on disc was not representative of the finished product. Let's face it, no one really expects a game to be perfect upon release, but to say that your first patch fundamentally changes the entire gaming experience is basically admitting that you willingly sent a broken game to manufacturing. But, patch or no, No Man's Sky suffers from extreme Skyrim syndrome. There is just so much nothing. Yes, there are things to do, but the game almost goes out of its way to make you not want to do them. At the start of the game, you wake up next to your damaged spaceship on an alien planet. You're told that you need to find various items to repair your ship and blast off to start your intergalactic exploration. But what follows is pretty much the entire game. Find resources, refuel your ship, fly somewhere else, repeat. You spend the overwhelming bulk of the game just collecting resources to craft items to continue on your journey. That's it. This footage of my mining gold, this is the entire game. Sure, you can upgrade your suit, your ship, your tool to make things a little more efficient, but the fundamentals never change. Fly somewhere, collect resources, fly somewhere else. Real quick, let me just say that I got off that first planet in about 20 minutes, which apparently is really good. I've been reading about players who have spent literally hours, trying to get off that first planet because the necessary resources are not always located close to the player's starting location and are not always in sufficient quantities. That's ridiculous. And that same frustration continues throughout the entire game. Even when you get to a space station and can buy resources, you're still doing it in order to craft some item so you can blast off to another planet, another system, another space station, and repeat it all over again. And all that might be tolerable if the game made good on the promise to present players with truly memorable locations. But after the first few planets, you realize that they really aren't that different. Sure, the geography and the atmospheric conditions do change, but the flora and fauna really don't. In any gaming system, you have a limited number of variables, and even a game as massive as No Man's Sky can't hide that fact. The difference here is that all possible variations are located somewhere in the game, and that would be awesome if the number of variables was 18 quintillion. But it's not! Nowhere even close to that. There is so much repetition in a game where there's not supposed to be any repetition. Interacting with the various aliens in the game gets pretty old pretty quick when you consider how limited those interactions really are. You can trade with pretty much all of them, try to learn their languages, and that's about it. And they are so scattered and so isolated in the game that you start to wonder who built all these settlements and these space stations if one creature, just one creature, is going to be there. Like the universe itself, the scale is mind-boggling, but everything is largely empty. And then there is the multiplayer aspect. It does not exist. Purportedly, you can find planets and systems already discovered by other players. I haven't yet, but other people have. But you cannot actually interact with other players. Maybe it's just me, but that makes the universe feel even more isolating. The inventory is a joke. I can't think of any other game that has an inventory this repugnant. Resources can be stacked up to a certain point, but no other item can be stacked. I get it. You have limited space in your exosuit and in your spaceship, and you need to upgrade in order to have space. Fine, but don't make getting those upgrades into yet another tedious chore that interferes with all the other tedious chores we have to do just to survive. The interface makes a bad game even worse by requiring you to hold down every single button. All of them. Nothing is immediate. You have to hold down the square button in order to harvest certain resources. You have to hold down the square button in order to open boxes. You have to hold down the X button in order to make a menu selection. You have to hold down the triangle button in order to rename a planet. If you don't want to confirm every action, fine, but all this does is slow the game down. And in a game that moves at a glacial pace to begin with, that's a major problem. And then there are the journey milestones. Every few actions you take, it seems like you get a journey milestone achieved message, which effectively prevents you from doing anything beyond moving around. You can't interact with anything until the message goes away, and that message takes its sweet-ass time leaving the screen. Graphically, the game is pretty and damaged. Textures are lacking much in the way of visual flair, and pop-in is so bad that you'd be forgiven for thinking this was a PS1 game. Just watch when you fly down to the surface of any planet for proof. The frame rate is not terribly stable, though it's certainly not the worst I've ever seen, and the narrow field of view is bad enough that it's making players nauseous, actually nauseous, and there's no option to change it. Look, No Man's Sky is definitely ambitious in scope, but when you get past the 18 quintillion planets, you're left with a fairly dull survival game. Do I think Hello Games will improve the game over time? Probably, but right now, there really isn't a compelling reason to play this game. After my first hour with it, just 1 hour, I shut the game off and really did not want to play anymore. But I did, and now after several hours more, I can safely say, it does not get any better. No Man's Sky is simply not worth your money right now. That may change in the future, but for right now, spend your money on something else. This is Jonathan for Pomegranate Radio. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.